In this module of the biogeography or zoogeography, we will be discussing about the patterns of biodiversity. And in there, we will be focusing on biodiversity and the number of species on the planet. So, biodiversity is an expression of the great variety of living things on our planet, but it is far more than a simple count of species. So, it is not just a number of species on the planet, but also its composition. We take a species and analyze its composition, and we find that it consists of series of populations. So different populations are living in different areas of the an area, and these subpopulations are living isolated from each other. So this resulted into a fragmented population. The isolated populations are genetically distinct and can be classified as subspecies if they are genetically distinct enough. We can call them subspecies, but even within a single population, there is often great variation between individual organisms. So individual organisms, if you see, even in human being, there are a lot of different populations, and in each of these population, within the population, the individual variations are there. These individual variations can be genetic, or these can be phenotypic as well. So, how many species are there in our planet? Many species are difficult to identify. So, first of all, we have to agree on a definition of a species, and then we can count that according to that particular definition, how many species are present on the planet. The number of expert scientists in the field of taxonomy are relatively few, and the task of counting the species is much more difficult to accomplish than might at first appear. So we can see that it looks easy that we can count the different species, but this task is much more difficult than it first appears. The convenient idea that two species cannot interbreed is not actually workable, because it is often found that interbreeding is possible between several animal and plant species that are morphologically distinct. So sometimes that two plants or two animals which are morphologically distinct, they look different, they are maybe much more related than the other organisms in the environment, and they can interbreed. So we cannot say that the common definition of species on which we agree on normally, we study in the textbook, is that the species is a group of living organisms which are similar to each other, and they can interbreed and produce a fertile offspring. But that can be true for many animals or plants which are morphologically similar, not very similar, but still they can interbreed and produce the fertile offspring. So undoubtedly many species yet to be discovered. So another point that is difficult for determining the biodiversity or the number of species on the planet is that we don't know that how much more species are there. We haven't discovered those. Approximately 1.8 million species of organisms that have been described, and many may have been described and named twice and even more times. So the ones we have seen, in those there is a problem that we can have some alias problem. Alias problem is that the one scientist identified that species, and then there came another scientist and he identified or she identified that species, and when they described each of those species, they did not read about the other scientist, and they both reported those species independently, thus resulting the same species with the two names in the taxonomy. And then there is the diversity of microbes, bacteria, fungi, and viruses, the things that we cannot even see with the naked eye, is a difficult to estimate. So, not as well known as the mammals or the flowering plants. Of the bacteria, only about 4,000 species have so far been discovered. So, given the area, the vast area of the biosphere, these are peanuts. These are very, very small number of bacteria species which we have yet identified. So here we have a patterns of biodiversity of insect, fungi, arachnid, viruses, nematodes, bacteria, vascular plants, protozoans, algae, mollusks, crustaceans, and vertebrates. The numbers of described species in selected group of organisms, together with the likely total number on the earth and the percentage of the group that is currently known, and this was the data from Groombridge. So here you can see that only 12% of the insects that we currently know, and the total may be 8 million, and out of those we have just identified the 950,000 insect species. And so is the trend for the other organisms, and we have yet to describe and identify the 10% of vertebrates as well. So extinction is occurring all around. So another problem with the estimating the number of species is that we are not counting that how many species that we have identified have gone extinct, because we have just identified those, cataloged those, and we have studied those, but they may not be present even today. So the biologist Edward O. Wilson has calculated that loss of species from the tropical forest area alone could currently be as high as 6,000 species per year. So this is the large number of species that we are losing on the yearly basis, and due to this large number that we are which is getting extinct, we cannot assess the correct biodiversity of the environment or an area.